Hey guys! Tonight we are drifting back, way back, to a time before the pharaohs built their pyramids, before the philosophers of Greece wandered their porticos, even before Stonehenge was a twinkle in some Neolithic architect's eye. We're going to the land between two rivers, the place the Greeks would later call Mesopotamia. You're standing on a wide, sun-scorched plain under a vast, endless sky. Two great rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, snake across the landscape, their waters glittering like veins of life in an otherwise harsh, dusty world. This is where it all began. The first cities, the first writing, the first laws. It's the incubator of civilization. And honestly, your chances of surviving here are not great. Forget Wi-Fi. You'd be lucky to find water that won't kill you. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It helps the channel more than you know. And for a bit of fun, drop your location and what time it is for you in the comments below. It's always fascinating to see where everyone is tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your world is one of constant motion, a life measured not in years, but in seasons and migrations. The Great Ice Age, a relentless tyrant that has held the world in its grip for millennia, is finally loosening its hold. For thousands of years, your ancestors huddled in caves, wrapped in animal hides, hunting the massive beasts of the frozen plains, the woolly mammoth, the giant elk, the cave bear. Their world was stark and white, a brutal, beautiful landscape of ice and wind. But now, you can feel a change in the air. The long, deep freeze is ending. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the glaciers are retreating, groaning and cracking as they shrink back towards the poles. The meltwater swells ancient riverbeds and carves new ones, carrying with it a slurry of rich, fertile soil scraped from the bones of the mountains. The world is being reborn in a torrent of mud and water. The endless tundra gives way to marshlands, and then to grasslands dotted with new kinds of trees, oak, pistachio, almond. The air, once sharp and sterile, now carries the scent of damp earth and blooming life. The great herds of megafauna are dwindling, their icy kingdom vanishing. In their place, smaller, nimbler creatures appear. Wild goats in the rocky hills, gazelles on the plains, and enormous flocks of birds that darken the sky. Your life is tied to these animals. You and your small band of kin, perhaps 30 or 40 people in total, follow the herds. You are a hunter, a gatherer, a nomad. Your home is wherever you make camp for the night, a simple lean-to of branches and hides, or the shallow shelter of a rock overhang. Every single day is a gamble for survival. You wake with the sun, your stomach aching with a familiar emptiness. The hunt is the center of your universe. It requires immense skill, patience, and a deep, intuitive understanding of the natural world. You know how to read tracks in the dust, how to mimic a bird call to lure your prey, how to craft a deadly sharp point from a piece of flint. A successful hunt means a feast, the welcome slick of fat on your tongue, the warmth of a fire, and the security of a full belly for a day or two. A failed hunt means gnawing hunger and the quiet, desperate hope that tomorrow will be better. While the men often track the larger game, you, along with the women and children, are responsible for the gathering. Your eyes are trained to scan the landscape for anything edible. You search for roots and tubers to dig from the earth, berries and nuts in the sparse woodlands, the eggs of wild birds hidden in nests of reeds. It's a diet that would make any modern paleo enthusiast weep with envy. No processed sugars, no gluten, just whatever you can find that won't poison you. And that's a constant risk. You learn from your elders which mushrooms bring visions and which bring death, which leaves can soothe a wound and which will make you sick for days. Your entire existence is a finely tuned dance with nature, a cycle of movement, scarcity, and occasional, glorious abundance. But in this changing world, something new is happening. As you wander through the foothills of the Zagros Mountains, that great spine of rock that separates the Mesopotamian plain from the Iranian plateau, you notice something you've seen before, but never in such quantities. Stalks of wild grass, taller than a man, ripple in the breeze, their heads heavy with grain. It's wild barley and wild wheat. Before, you might have stripped a few heads to chew on as you walked, a minor snack. But this is different. You're looking at entire fields of it, a sea of potential food stretching as far as you can see. And a revolutionary thought begins to form, a thought that will undo the world you know. Why leave? The herds move on, but this grain stays here. It dies back in the heat of summer, but its seeds fall to the earth, and with the next rains, it returns. The food source is predictable. It is reliable. It is stationary. Your group makes a decision that feels both terrifying and liberating. You stay. You don't follow the migrating gazelles into the horizon. You make a camp near the fields of grain and you begin to harvest. At first, it's clumsy work. You use your hands, or perhaps a sharpened animal jawbone, to saw at the tough stalks. It's back-breaking labor under the hot sun. Then, someone has an idea. They take a piece of flint and carefully chip away at it, not to make a spear point, but a serrated edge, a small, sharp saw. They set this blade into a piece of wood or bone, creating the world's first sickle. Suddenly, you can harvest more grain in an hour than you could have gathered in a day. Now you have another problem: piles and piles of grain. You can't eat it all at once. You need to store it. You dig pits in the ground, lining them with clay that you bake hard with fire, creating waterproof silos to protect your precious harvest from moisture, mold, and hungry rodents. You need to process it. Chewing on raw, hard kernels of wheat is a good way to break your teeth. So you find two stones, a large flat one and a smaller, rounded one. You spend hours grinding the grain between them, crushing it into a coarse flour. You mix this flour with water, pat it into a flat cake, and bake it on a hot stone by the fire. You have just made the first piece of bread. Its taste is revolutionary. It is warmth, sustenance, and security all in one. This single act, the decision to stay and rely on the grain, is the pivot upon which all of human history will turn. Historians still argue whether this shift to a settled life, the Neolithic Revolution, was a choice born of genius or of desperation. Was it a pull factor, the allure of abundant, reliable grain leading to an easier life? Or was it a push factor, Dwindling herds of big game and population pressure forcing people to find a new, more intensive way to feed themselves? Perhaps it was both. Perhaps some groups saw it as a brilliant opportunity, while for others, it was the only option left. Either way, your life is now fundamentally different. Your temporary shelter is no longer enough. You begin to build something more permanent. You dig a shallow pit in the ground, a few feet deep, to create a floor that's cool in the summer and insulated in the winter. You raise walls of packed mud, or perhaps you weave reeds together and plaster them with clay. You lay a roof of branches and mud over the top, leaving a hole for the smoke from your fire to escape. It's not a palace, but it's yours. It's a home. Soon, other families, seeing your success, settle nearby. Your single hut becomes a small cluster of homes. This is no longer a temporary camp, it's a village. The sounds of your world change. The silence of the hunt is replaced by the constant, rhythmic scrape of stone on stone as grain is ground. The laughter of children who no longer have to walk for miles every day. The murmur of voices planning not just the next hunt, but the next harvest. This new life is intoxicating. You have a surplus of food for the first time in human history. And with surplus comes a strange new discovery. A quirky but game-changing tidbit from the past is the theory that beer, not bread, may have been the real driver of agriculture. Someone, somewhere, must have left a pot of gruel out for too long. It began to bubble and ferment. The curious soul who tasted this strange, fizzy concoction discovered its pleasant, mind-altering effects. Beer was nutritious, safer to drink than potentially contaminated water, and let's be honest, it made the back-breaking labor of early farming a little more bearable. The world's first happy hour had commenced, and it may have been the key incentive for planting more and more grain. But this new, settled life has a dark side. Your ancestors could walk away from their own filth. You cannot. Waste accumulates. The village becomes a breeding ground for pests and diseases that can sweep through your small community with devastating speed. You are now entirely dependent on the harvest. A year of drought, or a sudden flood that washes away your fields, means starvation on a scale your nomadic grandparents could never have imagined. And your stored grain, your visible wealth, is a tempting prize for other groups who are still living the old way. The first walls are built not for privacy, but for defense. You've invented property, and right behind it, you've invented the need to protect it. It's a trade-off. The terror of the hunt has been replaced by the anxiety of the harvest. You've traded the freedom of the open plains for the security of a mud hut, and with it, you've also invented chores. The endless, repetitive tasks of planting, weeding, harvesting, grinding, and building. The world's first to-do list was probably a real downer. Still, as you sit at the entrance of your hut, watching the sun dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the fields you planted with your own hands, you feel a sense of accomplishment that is entirely new. Your belly is full of bread and beer. Your family is asleep inside, safe from the predators that roam the night. You are no longer just a creature reacting to the world. You are an architect, shaping it to your will. Right here, on this fertile plain between the two rivers, you and your small community are laying the foundation for everything to come. The simple act of planting a seed in the ground has sown the seeds of civilization itself. And as you drift off to sleep, you don't know it, but you are at the very beginning of a story that will lead to kings and empires, to ziggurats and writing, to a complexity of life that is, for now, utterly beyond your wildest dreams. The satisfaction you felt, the deep, bone-weary contentment of the first harvest, begins to fade into a new kind of rhythm. The world is no longer a vast, untamed wilderness that you pass through, but a plot of earth that you must tame, season after season. The freedom of the endless horizon has been traded for the tyranny of the calendar. Your life is now tethered to the slow, demanding cycle of the soil. You wake before the sun, not to track a gazelle, but to pull the stubborn weeds that threaten your precious barley. Your hands, once skilled at reading the faintest animal track, are now calloused and stained from breaking the earth with a pointed digging stick. This is farming, in all its unglamorous, back-breaking reality. It's less of a revolutionary choice now and more of a daily chore. You've essentially invented the dawn-to-dusk workday, a concept your nomadic ancestors would have found utterly baffling. But as you work the fields, you notice the other great change unfolding around your village. It's not just the plants you're learning to control. It's the animals. The hunt, that sacred and terrifying ballet of life and death, is becoming rarer. It's too risky, too unpredictable. Why spend days tracking a wild bull when a more manageable food source is right there, bleeding at the edge of the settlement? It started slowly. A hunter may have brought back a kid, a young goat whose mother had been killed. Instead of adding it to the cookpot, it was kept, tethered, perhaps as a pet for the children. It was fed scraps, and it grew. It was docile. It stayed. This small act is repeated. More young animals, goats from the hills, sheep from the plains, are captured and raised within the village. You are witnessing the dawn of herding. You and your neighbors begin to learn the animals' ways, not as prey, but as partners of a sort. You build simple enclosures of piled stones or thorny brush to keep them from wandering off at night. You guide them to the best grazing spots during the day and bring them back for protection. You are no longer just a hunter. You are a shepherd. A profound shift occurs in your thinking. An animal is no longer a one-time windfall of meat and hide. It is a living, walking pantry. This is the mainstream fact that changes everything. The domestication of livestock creates a stable, renewable source of food. You have meat on the hoof, ready whenever you need it. But it's so much more than that. You learn that by milking a goat or a ewe, you can get nourishment without killing the animal itself. This milk is a miracle. It can be drunk fresh, or you learn to let it sit, to watch it curdle and separate. You press the curds, salt them, and create a simple, tangy cheese that will last for weeks. You have a constant supply of protein that doesn't rely on a successful hunt or a good harvest. The bleating of your small flock is the sound of security. Of course, this comes with its own set of challenges. The village now has a distinct aroma, the earthy, pungent smell of manure. You have to protect your flock from predators like wolves and jackals, which are drawn to this convenient concentration of prey. And the animals get sick, requiring a whole new set of skills to tend to them. But the benefits are undeniable. Life becomes tangibly less precarious. The lean times between harvests are cushioned by a steady supply of milk, cheese, and the occasional feast of roasted meat. With this newfound stability from farming and herding, the very structure of your society begins to warp and change. For the first time in human history, you are producing a surplus of food. There is more grain in the clay-lined pits and more animals in the pens than your immediate family needs to survive. And this surplus is the most powerful force your world has ever known. It means that not every single person has to spend their entire day farming or herding. Human energy is liberated, freed up to focus on other things. You see specialists emerge. One of your neighbors has a particular knack for pottery. Her pots aren't just functional. They're thin-walled, strong, and beautifully shaped. They hold water better, store grain more securely. Soon, she spends all her time at her primitive kiln, trading her superior pots for measures of barley and cuts of meat. She is the first professional artisan. Another man has a gift for working with stone. He doesn't just make simple tools. He can flake a block of obsidian into a dozen razor-sharp blades, or craft a perfectly balanced axe head. His work is in high demand. He trades his tools for his daily bread. He is a craftsman. A woman who knows the properties of plants becomes the village healer. Another, with a talent for weaving, begins to turn the coarse wool from your sheep into rough but warm cloth, a welcome change from drafty animal hides. And then there are the less tangible specializations. An old man, wise and charismatic, spends his time studying the sky. He marks the movements of the sun, the moon, and the stars, creating a calendar that tells everyone the precise, most auspicious time to plant and to harvest. His knowledge is vital. He is the first scientist, the first astronomer. He commands respect. Perhaps he also claims to speak with the unseen forces that control the rains and the floods, the spirits of the river and the sky. He leads the rituals, the prayers for a bountiful harvest. He is the first priest. His power is immense, for he trades not in pots or tools, but in hope and cosmic security. This specialization inevitably gives rise to social classes. It's no longer a society of equals, all engaged in the same struggle for survival. A hierarchy begins to form, as natural and inevitable as a river finding its course to the sea. The family whose plot of land, by sheer luck, is the most fertile and best watered produces the biggest surplus. They have more grain to trade, more wealth to accumulate. They can afford to support more artisans, to build a larger house, to maintain a bigger flock. They become influential. The clever individual who builds a better irrigation ditch to water his fields gets a better yield. His neighbors, seeing his success, might offer him a portion of their harvest in exchange for access to his ditch. He has just invented rent, and with it, a new form of power. The first guy to figure out that he could lend 10 seeds and ask for 11 back a season later probably got some funny looks, but he was onto something big. Anthropologists debate whether this emerging social stratification was a willing pact or a quiet conquest. Was it a logical step, embraced by the community for the greater good? Did everyone agree that the skilled potter or the wise priest should be freed from farm labor to benefit the whole village? Or was it driven by ambition and cunning? Did charismatic or ruthless individuals simply manage to gain control of the food surplus and leverage it for personal power, creating a system of dependency that others were forced to accept? It was likely a messy combination of both, a dance of cooperation and coercion that played out in thousands of small interactions every day. This new society requires new technologies and new ways of using old ones. You're not just living on the land, you're re-engineering it. You learn to build with sun-dried mud bricks, stacking them to create sturdy, multi-room houses that are a far cry from the simple pit houses of your ancestors. You live with your extended family in a compound, with rooms for sleeping, a courtyard for cooking, and pens for the animals. Life is becoming more organized, more private. And you discover the incredible resourcefulness that a domesticated animal provides, a quirky fact of ancient life that we often overlook. The whole animal philosophy wasn't a trendy butcher shop slogan, it was a reality. Wool and hides were obvious boons, providing textiles and leather. But the bones were carved into needles, awls, and fishhooks. The horns were hollowed out to make drinking cups. The sinew was used as strong cordage. Even the animal's bladder, once cleaned and dried, became a lightweight, durable canteen for carrying water. And the dung, that ever-present feature of village life, was a critical resource. It was collected, dried into cakes, and used as a slow-burning fuel for fires, especially in areas where wood was scarce. Every single part of the animal was repurposed. Nothing was wasted. This transformation in your external world, the fields, the flocks, the village, is mirrored by a transformation in your internal world. Your mind is being rewired. As a nomad, your thoughts were on the immediate. The hunt today, the shelter tonight. As a farmer and a herder, you are forced to think in longer timelines. You must save the best seeds from this year's harvest for next year's planting. You must manage your flock to ensure there are enough young to replace the old. You must store food to survive the winter. You are constantly planning, calculating, and looking ahead. The concept of the future has become a central, nagging presence in your mind. Your very identity has shifted. It's no longer defined by your clan and its journey through the landscape. It is now rooted in a specific place. This patch of earth, this house of mud brick, this field of barley, this is your home. It's where your ancestors are buried and where your children will be born. The idea of defending this land becomes a sacred duty. The world is no longer a shared space, but a patchwork of territories. Your neighbors, once fellow wanderers, are now potential rivals for the most precious resources: land and water. The small village is thriving, growing larger with each passing generation. But in the rich soil of this agricultural revolution, you have planted not only barley and wheat, but also the seeds of inequality, property, and conflict. The very solutions you've found to the old problems of survival are creating a host of complex new ones that will require even more ingenious solutions, and perhaps a harder kind of power. The quiet order of your village, once a source of comfort, is now beginning to feel small. The routines are set, the social ladder is largely in place, and the patch of land you call home feels both secure and constricting. The tools you use, so revolutionary just a few generations ago, now seem clumsy. Your stone sickle chips and dulls. Your wooden digging stick breaks against hard, sun-baked earth. Your best clay pot, a marvel of its time, can still crack and ruin a month's worth of stored grain. There's a ceiling to what you can achieve with stone, wood, and bone, and your society is pressing right up against it. The desire for something better, something stronger, something more efficient, hangs in the air like the heat before a storm. The breakthrough, when it comes, isn't a grand revelation, but a series of fortunate accidents. Someone, perhaps a potter with a flair for decoration, uses some pretty greenish-blue stones to ring their kiln. The fire roars for hours, reaching temperatures hotter than any cooking fire. When the kiln cools, they find something extraordinary among the ashes. The greenish stones are gone, and in their place are small, gleaming, reddish beads of a substance no one has ever seen before. It's heavy, shiny, and strangely soft. You can take one of these beads and hammer it. Unlike a rock, which would shatter, this new material, copper, flattens and bends. It is malleable. The discovery causes a stir. At first, it's a curiosity, a luxury. The first copper objects are not tools, but ornaments. A skilled craftsman hammers the metal into delicate pins for fastening clothes, elegant fish hooks that won't snap, or shiny rings to be worn by the village chief. It's beautiful, it's rare, and it's a symbol of status. But when someone tries to make a practical tool, the limitations become clear. A copper axe head is a beautiful thing to behold, but try to chop down a tree with it, and its edge rolls and dulls almost immediately. A copper knife loses its sharpness after just a few cuts. It's just too soft. It's the ancient world's equivalent of getting that hot new piece of tech you've been saving up for, only to find out its battery life is about 20 minutes. A real disappointment. But the seed of an idea is planted. Metallurgy has been born. The smiths, the masters of this new art, keep experimenting. They are the first true engineers, working with fire and ore. They discover that some copper ores produce a better, harder metal than others. They don't know why, but we do. This is a quirky and dangerous chapter in the story of invention. These particular ores were naturally rich in arsenic. This created a natural alloy, arsenical copper, which was a significant improvement. The tools were harder, the weapons more effective. But this advance came at a terrible cost. Imagine the scene. A smith stands over his charcoal furnace, pumping a set of bellows. He's breathing in the fumes rising from the molten metal, fumes laced with toxic arsenic. He is slowly poisoning himself. The smiths who mastered this technology were revered for their seemingly magical skills, but they often paid for it with their lives, suffering from nerve damage, weeping skin lesions, and a catalog of other grim afflictions. They were pioneers on the frontier of technology, the unwitting martyrs of the early Metal Age. Then comes the real leap forward. The one that will define an entire epoch of human history. Someone, somewhere, perhaps in the mountains of Anatolia or the plains of Syria, makes the critical discovery. It might have been by chance, an impurity in the ore, or it might have been a stroke of genius, a deliberate experiment. They add a small amount of a different metal, a soft, silvery, and exceedingly rare substance called tin, to the molten copper. The result is an alloy that is not just a little bit better, but miraculously, transformatively better. The result is bronze. The discovery of bronze changes everything. This is the mainstream historical fact that rings through the ages. Bronze is a marvel. It's far harder than copper, yet it can be melted and poured into intricate molds, allowing for the mass production of identical items. Once it cools, it can be sharpened to a fine, durable edge. A bronze axe can fell an oak tree. A bronze-tipped plow can cut through tough, virgin soil, opening up vast new areas for farming. And a bronze sword. Well, a bronze sword is a weapon of terrifying efficiency, an instrument of power unlike anything the world has seen before. The village is no longer quiet. The air is now filled with the sounds of this new age, the roar of furnaces, the rhythmic clang of hammer on metal, the hiss of glowing liquid bronze being poured into molds of clay or stone. The smell is acrid and powerful, a mix of burning charcoal and hot metal that is the signature scent of progress. But this progress comes with a major supply chain headache. Copper ore can be found in a number of places. But tin? Tin is impossibly rare. The main sources are thousands of miles away, in the mountains of Afghanistan or the riverbeds of Anatolia, perhaps even as far as Cornwall in distant Britain. To make bronze, you need both. And suddenly, your world, which once ended at the horizon, is connected to places you can't even imagine. The age of long-distance trade begins not with a desire for silk or spices, but with the desperate, strategic need for tin. A new kind of person emerges, the merchant. These are not farmers or smiths, but daring entrepreneurs who organize caravans of donkeys, loading them with your village's surplus, sacks of grain, bolts of wool cloth, fine pottery, and setting off on journeys that can last for months or even years. They travel across scorching deserts, navigate treacherous mountain passes, and negotiate with dozens of different tribes and chieftains, all to exchange your simple goods for the raw materials of power. You might give a merchant a pile of barley, and months later he returns with a few dull, heavy ingots of tin that are worth more than their weight in, well, anything else. You just have to hope he doesn't lose the package, because customer service back then was probably just a guy with a bigger club than you. It's a subject of debate how these complex trade routes were managed in an era before writing, currency, or a central government to enforce contracts. Was it all based on a fragile system of trust and gift-giving between powerful chiefs? Did powerful merchant families establish their own fortified outposts along the way, creating a kind of private, for-profit security network? Or were there unwritten rules, shared rituals, and religious customs that helped to bind these disparate cultures together in a web of commerce? Whatever the mechanism, it worked. The world had its first global supply chain, and it was all in the service of making better tools and deadlier weapons. This new technology pours gasoline on the fire of social inequality that was already smoldering. Bronze is incredibly expensive. Only the elite can afford it. The village chief no longer just has a bigger hut. He has a bronze axe as a symbol of his authority and a bronze dagger at his belt. His personal guards are armed with bronze-tipped spears and swords, making them an intimidating force. A farmer with a simple stone-tipped ard can be easily dominated by a wealthy landowner who can afford a bronze plowshare and the team of oxen to pull it. The gap between the haves and the have-nots widens from a crack into a chasm. Bronze isn't just a metal. It's a status symbol, a barrier, and an instrument of control. Inevitably, warfare is revolutionized. A fight between two neighboring villages in the Stone Age was likely a chaotic affair of wooden clubs, stone-tipped arrows, and a lot of shouting. The goal was probably to drive off rivals or steal some food. But with bronze, conflict becomes something far more organized and lethal. Armies are now equipped with standardized weapons. Soldiers wear bronze helmets that can deflect a blow, carry bronze-reinforced shields, and wield swords that can kill with a single, efficient thrust. The goal of war shifts from simple raiding to outright conquest. Why just steal your neighbor's grain when you can take his fields, his village, and his people? The arms race has officially begun, and everyone wants the latest model. You can almost hear the chieftain saying, "Is that the new Zagros Mountain 2.0 sword? The blade on my old Mesopotamian model just isn't what it used to be." As the section of our story closes, your world is humming with a new and nervous energy. The sleepy, inward-looking farming village is being transformed. It's becoming richer, more populous, and more connected to the outside world than ever before. The demand for bronze is pulling you into a network of exchange that spans a continent. But this new connectivity is a double-edged sword. It brings wealth and technology, but it also brings competition, rivalry, and a more destructive form of warfare. The most successful villages are swelling in size, growing from towns into the world's first small cities. They build bigger walls, support more artisans, and field larger armies. The stage is now set for these burgeoning centers of power to collide, to vie for control of the precious trade routes and fertile river valleys. The Bronze Age is forging not just tools and weapons, but a new and more complex form of human society, the city-state. The world forged by bronze is now reaching its boiling point. The successful towns, swollen with wealth from trade and agriculture, are exerting a powerful gravitational pull. They are swallowing the smaller villages around them, absorbing their people and their land. You find yourself drawn from the quiet predictability of your farming hamlet towards the noise, the chaos, and the promise of one of these burgeoning centers. You are migrating to the city. As you approach, the first thing you see is the wall, a massive, muscular rampart of sun-baked brick, punctuated by imposing towers. It's a statement of power, a clear line drawn in the dust separating order from chaos, us from them. Passing through the Great Gate is like stepping into another world. The sheer density of people is overwhelming. The streets are narrow, unpaved, and winding, a labyrinth of mud brick houses packed tightly together. You have to jostle for space with merchants shouting their wares, donkeys laden with goods, and children darting underfoot. The air is thick with a cocktail of smells unimaginable in your village. The rich scent of baking bread from a communal oven, the sharp tang of metal from a smith's workshop, the cloying sweetness of incense wafting from a shrine, and overlaying it all, the ever-present, pungent aroma of thousands of people and their animals living in close quarters. This isn't a village anymore. This is an urban jungle, and it is electric with a new and powerful kind of human energy. You quickly learn the organizing principle of this new world. This city, whether it's the ancient Eridu, the mighty Kish, or the sprawling Lagash, does not belong to the people who live in it. This is the central, mainstream fact of your new reality. The city is the literal, earthly estate of a god. Eridu is the property of Enki, the clever god of wisdom and sweet waters. The great city of Uruk belongs to Inanna, the formidable goddess of love, fertility, and war. Your life, your labor, your very existence within these walls is ultimately in service to this divine landlord. At the physical and spiritual heart of the city, dominating the flat landscape for miles around, is the god's home. It began, generations ago, as a simple temple on a raised platform, a way to lift the god's house above the mortal world. But with each passing king, eager to prove his piety and power, it has grown. Now, it is a ziggurat, a colossal, stepped pyramid of solid mud brick, a man-made mountain reaching for the heavens. Its sheer scale is meant to inspire awe and humility. It is the center of your universe, the axis connecting the earthly realm to the divine. From its summit, the priests read the stars. From its storerooms, the city is fed. From its sacred heart, power radiates outwards, touching every aspect of life. And this leads to a fascinating and quirky detail about your new civic duty. You understand that the statue of the god, which sits in a shrine in the holiest chamber of the temple, is not merely a symbol. For you and your fellow citizens, the god literally inhabits the effigy. And a god, much like a king, has needs. This means that a huge portion of the city's resources are dedicated to divine housekeeping. An entire class of priests and priestesses exists to serve as the god's personal attendants. Their day is a strict routine of cosmic care. In the morning, the god is woken with the gentle music of a harp or lyre. The statue is then ritually washed with pure water and dressed in magnificent robes of the finest linen, adorned with necklaces of lapis lazuli and gold. The god must be fed, so twice a day, a grand feast is laid before the statue, platters piled high with roasted mutton, fresh fish, dates, figs, and cakes, accompanied by jugs of the best beer. After the god has had a chance to absorb the spiritual essence of the meal, the food is taken away and becomes the very welcome rations for the priests. It's arguably the best gig in the city. The god is then entertained for the rest of the day with hymns of praise and music, before being put to bed at night. The patron deity of your city is basically the universe's most demanding, high-maintenance house guest, and keeping them happy is everyone's #1 job. Managing this divine estate, along with a population that now numbers in the tens of thousands, requires a level of organization your ancestors could never have conceived of. You need a government. Power in the city-state flows from two centers, the temple and the palace. Initially, the temple was everything. The high priest, as the chief administrator of the god's household, controlled the land, collected the harvest, managed the vast herds, and ran the city's economy. It was a true theocracy, a government by the god, for the god, administered by the god's servants. But in an age of rising conflict, fueled by the ambitions of the Bronze Age, a different kind of leader becomes essential. You need someone to raise and lead an army, to command the soldiers in the shield wall, to make the hard, ruthless decisions of war and diplomacy. This leader is the Lugal, the big man, the king. He builds a palace for himself, a sprawling complex that soon rivals the temple in size and magnificence. It becomes a second center of power, the seat of secular, military authority. The exact nature of the king's power is complex and fluid. Scholars are still trying to piece together whether the ruler, the Ensi or Lugal, was initially seen as a god-king himself or merely as the chief servant of the city's god. Was he a deity walking among mortals, his authority absolute and divinely embodied? Or was his primary role that of a steward, the chief shepherd of the people, whose legitimacy depended entirely on his ability to serve the patron god and keep the city safe and prosperous? The propaganda, of course, leaned into the divine connection. Kings called themselves beloved of the gods, and depicted themselves in carvings as being physically larger than common mortals. But their position was often precarious. A lost battle, a severe famine, or a failure to complete a temple could be seen as a sign that the gods were displeased, and a king could find his divine mandate and his head swiftly revoked. To run the city, the king and the high priest need help. They create the world's first bureaucracy. You now see officials everywhere. There are tax collectors who come to your workshop to assess your yearly contribution to the state, not in coin, which doesn't exist yet, but in a portion of your goods. There are scribes, graduates of a special school, who use a reed stylus to press wedge-shaped marks into wet clay tablets, keeping meticulous records of every sack of grain, every head of cattle, every ration of beer distributed. You see overseers directing massive gangs of laborers, conscripted citizens, as they dredge canals or haul millions of mud bricks for the king's new city wall. You can almost imagine the invention of the world's first soul-crushing paperwork. No, Lugal Zarg, you can't get your barley ration until you've submitted Form 7b, inscribed in triplicate. The gods demand proper documentation. For an ordinary citizen like you, life in the city is a paradox. You are safer than you have ever been. The massive walls protect you from nomadic raiders. The central granaries, filled with the state's surplus, mean you are far less likely to starve if your own crop fails. The city offers opportunities to practice a trade, to see wonders, to be part of something vast and important. But you have traded freedom for this security. You are no longer your own master. Your life is subject to the decrees of the king and the demands of the temple. You pay taxes. You can be drafted into the army to fight in a war over a distant canal you've never seen. Your labor can be commanded for public works projects. You have become a citizen, a small but vital cog in a great and complex machine. As the sun sets, you might climb to the roof of your small, mud brick house to catch the evening breeze. You look out over the sprawling city. In the center, the ziggurat catches the last rays of light, a golden monument to your god and your city's power. You can see the dark green ribbons of the fields outside the walls, kept alive by the intricate network of canals, a testament to your king's authority. You can hear the sounds of thousands of lives being lived, a constant hum of human endeavor. This model of civilization, the walled city, the divine patron, the ruling king, the supporting bureaucracy, is a stunning success. It has created a society of unprecedented wealth, complexity, and power. But its very success has sown the seeds of the next great conflict. Because your city of Lagash is not alone. Just down the river, the rival city of Umma is also thriving. They have their own king, their own god, and their own powerful army. You both rely on the waters of the same river. You both covet the same strip of fertile land, the Gu Eden, that lies between your territories. The old rivalries of villages have been magnified to an epic scale. The stage is now set for a new kind of war, not a raid for sheep, but a total war of conquest between powerful, organized states, each convinced of its divine mandate to rule. The era of the lone city-state is ending, and the bloody dawn of the first empires is about to begin. Before you're conscripted to march in the army of your city-state, before the bronze spears are sharpened and the shield wall is formed, it's worth pausing to understand what you're even fighting for. It's about more than just land and water. To understand the fury of the coming wars, you first have to understand the universe you live in, the map of reality that is etched into your mind. It is a cosmos born of your surroundings, stark, beautiful, and terrifyingly precarious. You believe, as everyone does, that the world you stand on is a flat, circular disk, like a giant platter. This disk of land is what you know: the plains of Mesopotamia, the mountains to the east, the desert to the west. This entire landmass floats on the Apsu, a vast, primordial ocean of fresh water that exists in the depths. It is the source of the life-giving rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates, which well up from below to water your fields. It's also the source of the water in your wells and the marshlands at the edge of the world. Above you, impossibly high, is the great dome of heaven. It's a solid, celestial vault, perhaps made of polished lapis lazuli, that holds back the waters above the firmament. The sun, the moon, and the stars are not distant balls of fire. They are divine beings or celestial jewels fixed to this dome, moving in their predictable, eternal paths as ordained by the great gods. This entire cosmic structure, heaven above, earth in the middle, is surrounded by a bitter, saltwater sea, an impassable ocean of chaos. This is the mainstream and accepted model of the universe. But the map doesn't end there. Beneath the earth, beneath even the sweet waters of the Apsu, lies the most dreaded place of all, the underworld. The Sumerians call it Kur or Urkala, the land of no return. And this is where a truly chilling and quirky feature of your belief system comes into play. The underworld is not a place of fire and brimstone, nor a paradise for the righteous. There is no judgment based on your deeds in life. The fate of everyone, from the most powerful king to the most humble servant, is exactly the same. It is a realm of eternal, monotonous gloom. When you die, your ghost, your Giddim, is ferried across a subterranean river and led through 7 gates, each one stripping you of another piece of your earthly identity and power. You arrive in a vast, dark city of dust. There is no light here, save for the faint, cold glow of the ghosts themselves. And existence here is utterly bleak. The dead are clothed in feathers, like birds, and they huddle together in the darkness. Their food is dust, their drink is dry clay. The best you can hope for is that your descendants on earth will remember you. If they perform the proper funerary rites and leave offerings of food and water at your grave, a small portion of that essence might reach you, a brief moment of relief in an eternity of thirst. To be forgotten by the living is the ultimate terror, to be twice dead. The Yelp reviews for the afterlife would be absolutely scathing. 1 star. Dreary atmosphere, terrible food, no amenities. Would not recommend. In the world of the living, things aren't much more certain. The universe is teeming with gods and spirits, and these are not benevolent, all-loving deities. They are capricious, powerful, and deeply, recognizably human in their temperaments. They can be generous and wise, but they are also prone to jealousy, vanity, rage, and petty squabbles. The god Enlil can grow annoyed by the noise of humanity and decide to send a flood to wipe you all out. The goddess Inanna can decide she wants a new temple and throw a cosmic tantrum until she gets one. You and the rest of humanity were created for a single purpose: to be the slaves of the gods, to do the hard work of maintaining the world so they could live a life of divine leisure. Your entire existence is an exercise in appeasement, a constant effort to keep your cosmic landlords happy. A drought, a plague, a devastating flood. These are not random acts of nature. They are unambiguous messages of divine displeasure. In a universe so fraught with peril, ruled by such fickle gods and ending in such a grim hereafter, you crave one thing above all else: order. If the cosmos itself is fundamentally chaotic, then human society must be a bastion of predictability and justice. This desperate need for structure is the seed from which law is born. Long before the famous Code of Hammurabi, your city's rulers are making the first great attempts to fight injustice with written rules. Around 2400 BCE, a ruler named Urukagina takes the throne of your city of Lagash. He declares that the society has become corrupt. He issues a series of reforms, claiming that the powerful, the foremen, the priests, the wealthy, have been exploiting the poor. They are seizing people's donkeys, stealing their fish, and trampling their gardens. His laws are presented as a great restoration of justice, a return to the divinely ordained order. He is, in essence, the first politician to run on a platform of draining the swamp. These early legal codes are remarkable documents, inscribed on clay cylinders for all to see. They give us a fascinating glimpse into the struggles of an early urban society. But their exact purpose is still debated. Historians debate whether these early laws were prescriptive codes to be followed literally by judges in a courtroom, or more like royal propaganda designed to show the king as a just and pious ruler. Were they a kind of civil code, a comprehensive set of rules for resolving any dispute? Or were they more of a royal mission statement, a collection of precedents that declared, "I am a king who stands for fairness, and this is the kind of justice you can expect under my rule"? The truth is likely somewhere in between. They were part proclamation, part legal precedent, and part a desperate attempt to impose human order on a chaotic world. The laws themselves deal with the new and complex problems that arise when thousands of people live packed together in a city. They cover familiar ground: property rights, theft, contracts, family law. There are rules for what happens if a man's ox gores his neighbor's ox. There are laws governing divorce, outlining what a man must pay his wife if he casts her aside. There are regulations about inheritance, about the hiring of laborers, about what happens if a shepherd is negligent and his flock eats the crops in an adjacent field. You can almost hear the grumbling that led to each law. There was probably a whole series of incidents involving escaped goats eating prize-winning vegetables before someone said, "All right, that's it. We need a rule for this." These laws represent a monumental shift in human thought. For the first time, justice is not just the arbitrary whim of the strongest man or the village elder. It is something written, permanent, and, in theory, applicable to everyone. It's an attempt to create a system where disputes can be resolved with words and reason rather than with clubs and fists. It's the beginning of the idea that society can be engineered for fairness. Of course, the laws also serve to reinforce the existing power structure. They protected the property of the wealthy, enforced debts, and laid out harsh punishments for slaves who tried to escape. Justice was for everyone, but it wasn't necessarily equal. It's not hard to imagine the first lawyer jokes being etched into a wet clay tablet, probably complaining about billing by the syllable. This entire worldview, the fragile disk of the world, the gloomy underworld, the moody gods, and the desperate search for human-made order, provides the ideological fuel for the conflicts that are brewing. When your king, the Lugal of Lagash, decides to go to war with the neighboring city of Umma, he doesn't frame it as a simple grab for more farmland or control of a key canal. He frames it as a sacred duty. The land he is claiming is part of the divine estate of his city's god, Ningirsu. The people of Umma are trespassers on holy ground. The war is not just a political act, it is a religious crusade. He is the chosen instrument of his god, tasked with punishing the wicked, restoring the proper boundaries, and extending divine order into a place of chaos. His legal reforms at home and his military campaigns abroad are two sides of the same coin, the righteous struggle of order against chaos. And so, as you stand in formation, your bronze-tipped spear in hand, you are not just a soldier fighting for a king. You are an agent of the divine plan. You are fighting for your God, for the sanctity of your home, and for the cause of order in a hostile universe. Across the field, the soldiers of Umma feel the exact same way about their city and their God. This conviction, this absolute certainty in your own righteousness and the backing of your celestial patron, turns a simple territorial dispute into a clash of destinies. The coming wars will not be small. They will be fought with a religious fervor that will drench the Fertile Crescent in blood and pave the way for the rise of a new kind of power, one that seeks to unify not just a city, but the entire world under a single, all-powerful ruler. The world of warring city-states, which you now inhabit, has settled into a grim and bloody rhythm. For generations, your city of Lagash and the rival city of Umma have been locked in a bitter struggle over that same strip of fertile land, the Gu Eden. Kings come and go, battles are won and lost, and countless clay tablets are inscribed with treaties that are broken before the clay is even fully dry. It's a violent, draining stalemate that defines existence. The system of independent cities, each fiercely proud and loyal to its own patron god, has created a world of perpetual conflict. It's a political pressure cooker, and it is ripe for a man with enough ambition to break the cycle. That man appears to be Lugal Zaghazi, the king of Umma. He is a leader of vision and immense military skill. But his vision isn't to create something new, it's to perfect the old system. He embarks on a campaign of conquest, and one by one, the great cities of Sumer fall to him. He smashes the army of Lagash, conquers the sacred city of Uruk, and forces the northern city of Kish to bow to his authority. He unites Sumer under a single ruler for the first time. He calls himself the King of Uruk and King of the land, and he boasts that his dominion stretches from the lower sea, the Persian Gulf, to the upper sea, the Mediterranean. He has created a grand coalition, a personal union of all the Sumerian city-states. It is the pinnacle of the old Sumerian world order, and it is about to be utterly destroyed. The challenge comes from the north, and from a man who is everything Lugal-Zaghazi is not. He is not a Sumerian. He is not born of a royal line. His name is Sargon, and he is a Semitic speaker, an outsider from the city of Kish. His origin story, which he himself likely promoted, is the stuff of legend and a truly quirky tidbit of ancient propaganda. Sargon claimed he never knew his father. His mother was a high priestess, a woman sworn to chastity, and his birth was a secret shame. To save him, she placed him in a waterproofed basket woven from reeds, sealed it with bitumen, and set it afloat on the great Euphrates River. The current carried the basket downstream until it was found by a man named Aki, a humble gardener, who drew the baby from the water and raised him as his own son. It's a story that sounds remarkably familiar, a powerful narrative of a hero with hidden, perhaps divine, origins, destined for greatness despite his lowly start. From these humble beginnings, Sargon rises. He finds a position in the court of the king of Kish as a cupbearer. This is no mere servant's role. The cupbearer is one of the king's most trusted advisors, privy to the innermost secrets of the court and personally responsible for the king's safety from poison. It's the perfect position from which to observe, learn, and plot. The details are lost to history, but through some combination of charisma, cunning, and ruthlessness, Sargon seizes power. He overthrows the king he once served and takes the throne of Kish for himself. But Sargon is not content to simply rule another city-state. He has a radically different vision. He abandons Kish and founds an entirely new capital for himself, a city he names Akkad. This is a brilliant strategic move. He is not tied to an ancient Sumerian temple, with its entrenched priesthood and powerful noble families who might challenge his authority. Akkad is his city, built from the ground up, loyal only to him. And this decision has created a fascinating puzzle for the modern world. The exact location of Akkad, Sargon's capital city, remains one of the great unsolved mysteries of archaeology. For over a century, historians and archaeologists have searched for this legendary city, the heart of the world's first empire. We know from inscriptions it was a place of immense wealth and power, likely located somewhere on the Tigris River near modern Baghdad. But its ruins have never been found. They lie silent and undiscovered, buried beneath the dust of 4,000 years, a lost capital for a legendary king. From his new, mysterious base at Akkad, Sargon prepares to challenge the established order. The stage is set for one of the most pivotal clashes in ancient history. In the south, you have Lugal-Zaghazi, the great unifier, the champion of the Sumerian tradition, representing a confederation of city-states. In the north, you have Sargon, the Akkadian upstart, the man from nowhere, representing a revolutionary new idea, a single, centralized empire, where all other cities are merely provincial towns, subservient to the will of one throne. The war that follows is swift and brutal. This is the mainstream, empire-defining history. Sargon marches his highly disciplined Akkadian army south. His soldiers are professional, loyal to him personally, not to a city god. He meets the combined forces of Lugal-Zaghazi and the 50 local governors, the Enses, who support him. In a ferocious battle, Sargon's new model army shatters the old Sumerian coalition. He captures Lugal-Zaghazi himself, and in an act of supreme political theater and utter humiliation, Sargon puts the conquered king in a neckstock, like a common criminal or a dog, and personally marches him to Nippur, the most holy city in Sumer. He presents the defeated Lugal-Zaghazi at the gate of the temple of the great god Enlil, a clear and brutal message to all. The gods who once favored you now favor me. Victory in battle is just the first step. Sargon then embarks on the systematic conquest of all of Sumer. City by city, he defeats their armies and, in another revolutionary act, he orders their defensive walls to be torn down. You watch as the great brick walls of your own city, the walls that have protected you for generations, are dismantled by Sargon's soldiers. The message is clear. There is only one safe place now, and it is under the protection of Akkad. Your city is no longer an independent power, it is a subject. A public works program consisting entirely of demolition must have been a strange sight. Sargon is more than a conqueror. He is a brilliant administrator. He understands that you cannot hold an empire together by force alone. He replaces the traditional, hereditary Enses in the conquered cities with his own hand-picked governors, men loyal to him, many of them Akkadians who speak his language. He creates the world's first professional, standing army, garrisoning them throughout the empire to crush any thoughts of rebellion. He standardizes everything. The chaotic mess of different weights and measures used in each city is replaced by a single, official Akkadian standard. This facilitates trade, taxation, and communication across his vast domain. You can just imagine the groans of the merchants having to learn a whole new system. Wait, how many Akkadian shekels are in a Sumerian mina again? I just got used to the old way. What Sargon has created is something entirely new on the face of the earth. It is the world's first true empire, a vast, multilingual, multi-ethnic state, ruled from a single capital, by a single, all-powerful king and his dynasty. The age of the squabbling Sumerian city-states is over. The Akkadian Empire has begun. Sargon's ambition knows no bounds. He doesn't stop at the Persian Gulf. He leads his armies west into modern Syria, north into the mountains of Turkey, and east into Iran. He boasts of controlling the four corners of the universe, and of having washed his weapons in the lower and upper seas. He isn't just a king. He is building a legend that will be told for 1,000 years. As you stand in the shadow of your city's dismantled gate, you look out upon a changed world. The old order is gone, smashed to pieces by this unstoppable man from Akkad. The former gardener's boy, the baby in the basket, is now the most powerful man in the world. He has brought a kind of peace, the peace of total domination. The constant wars between cities have ended, replaced by the unchallengeable authority of Sargon. His empire is a marvel of military and administrative genius, a revolutionary new model for how to organize human society. But it is a creation built on conquest and held together by the force of Sargon's own personality. The Sumerian cities, with their proud histories and powerful gods, are simmering with resentment beneath the surface. The so-called barbarian tribes in the surrounding mountains and deserts press constantly on the borders. The empire is a magnificent, gleaming new machine, but it is fragile. As Sargon grows old, the question that hangs in the air is a simple one. Can this empire, the first of its kind, survive its creator? Or was it all just the dream of one great man, destined to crumble back into dust once he is gone? Sargon's magnificent empire, the first of its kind, hums along under the rule of his heirs. From your perspective in a conquered Sumerian city, it is a machine of awesome power and efficiency. The roads are safe for merchants, the canals are maintained, and the constant, draining wars between cities have ceased, replaced by the monolithic peace of Akkadian domination. But it is a brittle peace, maintained by fear and the constant presence of Akkadian garrisons. The memory of your city's independence is a fresh wound, and beneath the surface of enforced order, resentment simmers. Sargon's sons, Rimish and Manishtushu, spend almost their entire reigns like frantic firefighters, racing from one end of the empire to the other to stamp out the endless rebellions. Being the emperor of Akkad, it turns out, is less about sipping wine from a golden cup and more about playing a high-stakes, continental game of whack-a-mole with rebellious city governors. The empire is held together with bronze and blood, and the cost of maintaining it is immense. Then comes Sargon's grandson, Naram-Sin. He is a man forged in the image of his grandfather, charismatic, ruthless, and a brilliant military commander. He doesn't just quell the rebellions. He crushes them with such ferocity that he brings a new era of stability and expands the empire to its greatest territorial extent. But Naram-Sin possesses a level of ambition that even Sargon never displayed. He is not content to be a king, a mere mortal steward for the gods. He takes the unprecedented step of declaring himself a living god. His official title becomes Naram-Sin, the Mighty, the God of Akkad. In carvings, he is depicted wearing a horned helmet, an adornment previously reserved for deities alone. He has elevated himself from ruler to god-king, a move of supreme confidence that many, especially in the old Sumerian cities, would see as dangerous hubris. This act of divine self-promotion becomes the centerpiece of a cautionary tale that will be told for centuries, a quirky and powerful piece of literature known as the Curse of Akkad. This text, written long after the empire's fall, attempts to explain the catastrophe in theological terms. The story goes that Naram-Sin, in his arrogance, angered the great gods. When he sought guidance from Enlil, the chief god of the Sumerian pantheon, and received only silence, Naram-Sin flew into a rage. He did the unthinkable. He marched his army to the holy city of Nippur, the religious heart of Mesopotamia, and sacked it. He plundered the treasures of the Eker, Enlil's sacred temple, defiling the home of the gods on earth. According to the legend, this was the final straw. Enlil, in a fury, turned his back on Akkad and unleashed his vengeance. He summoned a new people from the mountains to the east, the Gutians, described as a people who know no inhibition, with human instinct but canine intelligence and monkey's features. The curse is vivid in its description of the chaos that followed. Famine so severe that parents ate their children, fields that grew no grain, rivers that flowed with no fish, and the great city of Akkad reduced to rubble. The story frames the empire's fall as divine retribution for one king's blasphemous pride. While the Curse of Akkad provides a mythic explanation, the historical reality is a more complex, and perhaps more terrifying, story of one of the world's first recorded civilizational collapses. The mainstream historical view sees the fall as a perfect storm of internal decay and external pressure. The internal rebellions had never truly stopped. The conquered Sumerian cities were a constant source of trouble, always waiting for a moment of weakness to reclaim their freedom. The empire was an occupying force in its own heartland, and the cost of policing its own subjects was draining its resources and manpower. While the empire was rotting from within, it was being hammered from without. The Gutians, the barbarians, from the Zagros Mountains, were the historical force behind the legend. For generations, they had been a nuisance on the eastern frontier. But now, with the empire weakened by infighting, they saw their opportunity. Their raids became invasions. They swept down from the mountains, overwhelming the Akkadian defenses. They were not an army of conquest seeking to create a new empire, but a wave of destruction. They sacked cities, burned fields, and eventually overran and destroyed the capital of Akkad itself, fulfilling the literary curse in a terrifyingly real way. The great experiment was over. But in recent decades, another suspect has entered the investigation, adding a chilling modern resonance to this ancient collapse. The degree to which a sudden, severe climate change event was the primary driver of the collapse is a topic of intense scholarly debate, but the evidence is compelling. Paleoclimatologists, studying ice cores, lake sediments, and soil samples, have identified what they call the 4.2 kiloyear event, a sharp, intense, and widespread drought that struck the Middle East and beyond around 2200 BCE, precisely when the Akkadian Empire was falling apart. Imagine the scene. For years, the seasonal rains become less reliable. The winters are dry. The mighty Tigris and Euphrates, fed by dwindling snowmelt in the mountains, shrink in their beds. The intricate network of irrigation canals, the lifeblood of the empire, begins to run dry. The vast agricultural fields that feed the cities and the armies turn to dust. Yields plummet. The surplus of grain that was the foundation of the empire's power vanishes. Famine stalks the land. Starving, desperate people from the countryside pour into the cities, searching for food that isn't there, overwhelming the administration. A society whose god-kings claimed to control the world could not make it rain. The government's legitimacy would have evaporated along with the water. This environmental catastrophe would have acted as a threat multiplier, turning existing problems into an insoluble crisis. A restive population is far more likely to rebel when it is starving. An army is useless if you can no longer feed it. The Gutian invaders weren't just attacking a weakened empire. They were walking into a collapsing ecosystem. Was the climate the primary cause, the knockout blow? Or were the political and military failures the real reason, with the drought just kicking the empire when it was down? We may never know for sure, but the convergence of evidence paints a grim picture of a complex society being assaulted on all fronts at once. The aftermath is a dark age. The great Akkadian machine grinds to a halt. The long-distance trade routes that brought tin from the mountains and cedar from Lebanon fall silent. The standardized system of weights and measures is forgotten. Literacy rates plummet as the scribal schools close. The grand, centralized state shatters back into 1,000 pieces. People abandon the dying cities and return to simpler, village-based lives. It's a stark reminder of how quickly the complex structures of civilization can unravel. Sargon's Make Akkad Great program had, it seems, hit a rather catastrophic snag. You find yourself in a world turned upside down. The order and security of the empire are gone, replaced by the chaos of Gutian raids and local warlords. It's a cautionary tale with striking parallels to our own time. A powerful, globe-spanning system dependent on a fragile environment, facing internal divisions and external pressures, suddenly confronted with a climate crisis it cannot control. The fall of Akkad is a sobering lesson from the deep past about the interconnectedness and vulnerability of all human societies. Yet, as the dust of the collapsed empire settles, Mesopotamia endures. Sargon's dream of a unified state has failed, but the memory of it has not been erased. The idea of empire is now loose in the world. In the southern cities, the heartland of Old Sumer, the native culture and language have survived the Akkadian domination. Priests have protected the old stories. Local leaders are biding their time, waiting for the moment when they can rise up, drive out the Gutian interlopers, and restore order. The world's first empire may be a ruin, but its failure has provided a set of hard-learned lessons for the next group of ambitious rulers who will attempt to build a new world from its ashes. The stage is set for a Sumerian renaissance, and for the rise of new powers like and, eventually, the city that will come to define the age, Babylon. The dust of Akkad's fallen empire settles over a fractured world. The Gutian invaders, who the Mesopotamians saw as uncivilized mountaineers, rule the land with a heavy, clumsy hand. They are occupiers, not administrators, and under their chaotic reign, the grand machinery of empire has rusted and seized. But Mesopotamian culture is resilient. In the south, in the old Sumerian heartland, the flame of civilization has been quietly tended. A brilliant but brief renaissance occurs under the kings of the third dynasty of who drive out the Gutians and create a highly centralized, bureaucratic Sumerian state. For a short time, the old language and customs flourish once more. But this revival also collapses under its own administrative weight and pressure from new waves of migrants. The world once again fragments into a mosaic of competing city-states. Into this power vacuum steps a new people, the Amorites, a Semitic-speaking group from the west who gradually take control of the old cities. The political landscape is a tangled web of alliances and rivalries. The kings of Isin, Larsa, and Eshnunna all vie for supremacy. And among them is a city that, until now, has been a relative backwater, a minor player on the great stage, Babylon. Its location is strategic, sitting astride the Euphrates where the two rivers are closest, a perfect choke point for trade. And it is about to produce a king who will change the world. His name is Hammurabi, the sixth king of Babylon's Amorite dynasty. When he takes the throne, his kingdom is small, surrounded by powerful and aggressive neighbors. He is no mighty conqueror, at least not at first. He is a political genius, a patient grandmaster playing a continental game of chess. For the first 30 years of his reign, he engages in a dazzling display of diplomacy. He makes an alliance with Larsa to defeat Eshnunna. He courts the powerful kingdom of Mari to the north. He bides his time, builds his economic and military strength, and masterfully plays his rivals against one another, all while publicly presenting himself as a loyal ally and a humble servant of the gods. He was the kind of guy who would bring a fruit basket to a peace negotiation while simultaneously funding your enemy's army under the table. Then, when the time is right and his enemies are weakened and isolated, he strikes. In a series of lightning-fast campaigns, he turns on his former allies. He conquers Larsa. He marches on Mari, his longtime partner, and completely destroys the city. Within a few short years, he has crushed all his rivals and unified all of Mesopotamia under his rule. He is the new Sargon, the new emperor. But Hammurabi is determined to build something more lasting than the Akkadian Empire, which was founded on conquest and crumbled into rebellion. He seeks to create an empire built not just on power, but on a unifying principle of justice. His grandest statement of this vision is the monumental object for which he is most famous, his law code. Imagine yourself standing before it in the temple precinct of Babylon. It is a single, towering stele of polished black diorite, standing over 7 feet tall. The stone is cool to the touch and covered in hundreds of columns of tiny, precise, wedge-shaped cuneiform script. At the very top is a magnificent carving. You see Hammurabi himself, standing in a posture of pious reverence. Before him, seated on a throne, is the mighty Shamash, the sun god, the god of truth and justice. Shamash extends towards Hammurabi a ring and a staff, the divine symbols of royal authority. The message is unambiguous and brilliant political marketing. These are not my laws. I, Hammurabi, am merely the humble shepherd of my people, receiving these divine ordinances from the God of justice himself. This is the mainstream fact that has echoed through millennia. The Code of Hammurabi contains 282 laws that create a detailed blueprint for a complex society. They cover everything from business contracts and property disputes to family law and violent crime. And they are most famous for enshrining the principle of lex talionis, the law of retaliation. Law 196 states, "If a man put out the eye of another man, his eye shall be put out." Law 200, "If a man knock out the teeth of his equal, his teeth shall be knocked out." This sounds brutal to our ears, but in its time, it was a major step forward. It limited retribution. It prevented endless blood feuds where a minor insult could escalate into generations of retaliatory murder. The punishment was to be swift, final, and proportional to the crime. However, a closer look at the code reveals that justice in Babylon was anything but blind. The punishment you received depended heavily on who you were and who you wronged. Society was divided into 3 classes: the Awilim, or the upper class of nobles and property owners; the Mushkanim, or commoners and free people of lower status; and the Wardam, or slaves. If an Awilim knocks out the eye of another Awilim, he loses his own eye. But if that same nobleman knocks out the eye of a Mushkanim, he doesn't lose his eye. He simply pays a fine of 1 silver mina. If he knocks out the eye of a slave, the fine is even less. It was a legal system with a tiered subscription plan: premium justice for the nobles, basic for the commoners, and a very limited budget plan for the enslaved. For all its detailed procedures, the code had a fascinating fallback for when evidence was inconclusive. Let the gods decide. This is where you find the quirky and terrifying practice of trial by ordeal. For a crime like sorcery, which is notoriously difficult to prove, Law 2 states that the accused must go to the Holy River. If the Holy River prove him guilty, his accuser shall take possession of his house. This refers to the river ordeal. The accused was literally thrown into the Euphrates. If they sank and drowned, the river god had taken them, proving their guilt. If they managed to float or swim ashore, the river god had rejected them, proving their innocence. In that case, their accuser was the one who would be put to death for bearing false witness. It was the ultimate appeal to a higher court, and a powerful deterrent against making flimsy accusations. Just like the earlier law codes, the true purpose of Hammurabi's stele is a matter of scholarly contention. Legal historians still debate whether the code was a functioning statute book for judges or primarily a piece of royal apologia. Was a Babylonian judge expected to consult this specific stele to render a verdict? Or was it a masterpiece of royal propaganda, a monument that celebrated Hammurabi as the ideal shepherd of the people, a wise and just king? The fact that very few surviving court documents from the period actually reference the code suggests it might be the latter. It was a declaration of ideals, a justification of his rule to the gods, to his subjects, and to future generations. Under Hammurabi's long and stable reign, Babylon enters a golden age. The city becomes the largest and most prosperous city in the world, the undisputed center of politics, religion, and culture. Babylonian scholars make huge advances in mathematics, creating the base 60 system that we, for some reason, still use today to measure time and the degrees in a circle. Their astronomers meticulously chart the heavens, creating the foundations for both astronomy and astrology. It is an era of immense wealth and intellectual achievement. As you look upon the great stele of Hammurabi, you see the culmination of 1,000 years of Mesopotamian progress. The king has built an empire more stable and integrated than Sargon's, founded not merely on military might, but on a powerful, unifying ideal of divinely inspired law. The code is a promise of order in a chaotic world. But no earthly creation, no matter how magnificent, is permanent. The very success of Babylon, its glittering wealth and fertile lands, makes it a tantalizing prize. Hammurabi's dynasty will continue for a time, but his empire will slowly weaken. And on the distant frontiers, new and formidable peoples are gathering strength, watching, and waiting for their moment to strike the great city itself. The foundation of justice is strong, but the house that Hammurabi built will eventually face its own day of judgment. Hammurabi's golden age, like all golden ages, eventually tarnishes. His dynasty weakens, and the great city of Babylon is sacked by a new power from the north, the Hittites. For centuries after, Mesopotamia is ruled by outsiders like the Kassites, a long but stagnant period of slow decline. Then, a new terror arises. The Assyrian Empire, forged in the northern city of Ashur, explodes onto the world stage. The Assyrians are masters of warfare and administration, and their brutality is legendary. They conquer Mesopotamia, including a rebellious Babylon, which they level to the ground. For a time, It seems the shadow of Assyria will last forever. But Babylon is never truly gone. It endures. It dreams. And it rises again. The Chaldean king Nabopolassar forges an alliance with the Medes, a powerful people from the east, and together they do the unthinkable. They attack Assyria in its heartland, destroying its magnificent capital of Nineveh. From the ashes of the Assyrian Empire, the Neo-Babylonian Empire is born. And you are a citizen of this new, glorious Babylon, a city reborn under its greatest king, Nabopolassar's son, Nebuchadnezzar II. Your city is the wonder of the world. It is the largest, wealthiest, and most magnificent city on the planet. Its defenses are the stuff of legend. An enormous moat, fed by the Euphrates, surrounds it. Inside the moat is an outer wall, and inside that, an even more colossal inner wall, so thick that 2 chariots could race abreast on its top. You enter the city through one of 8 monumental gates, the most famous being the Ishtar Gate, a breathtaking structure covered in brilliant blue glazed bricks and decorated with reliefs of dragons and bulls. At the city's heart stands the mighty Ziggurat Etemenanki, the temple of the foundation of heaven and earth, a solid tower of brick rising hundreds of feet into the sky, the likely inspiration for the biblical story of the Tower of Babel. The city feels eternal, impregnable. It is the center of the universe. But the brilliance of Nebuchadnezzar's reign is short-lived. His successors are weak, and the empire begins to fray at the edges. Then comes the last king of Babylon, a man named Nabonidus. And he is strange. This is the quirky but crucial detail that seals Babylon's fate. Nabonidus is not a soldier or a statesman in the mold of his predecessors. He is an intellectual, an antiquarian, a religious scholar. And he has an obsession. He is devoted to the cult of the moon god, Sin, whose main temple is in the distant city of Ur. He begins to elevate Sin above all other gods, including Babylon's own patron and the king of the gods, Marduk. This is a theological and political catastrophe. The priesthood of Marduk in Babylon is the oldest, wealthiest, and most powerful institution in the empire. By neglecting Marduk, Nabonidus makes a formidable enemy of the entire religious establishment. To make matters worse, he abandons his capital city of Babylon for a full decade, moving to the remote desert oasis of Taming in Arabia to excavate ancient ruins and build a new center for his moon god. He leaves his son, Belshazzar, to rule in his place, but the message is clear. The king cares more about his pet religious projects and his archaeological hobbies than he does about his own capital city. He was the world's first CEO to try working remotely, and let's just say the company culture took a massive hit. While Nabonidus is busy cataloging old inscriptions in the desert, a political earthquake is shaking the world. A new power has risen in the east, a man named Cyrus, king of a small Persian kingdom called Anshan. In a stunningly short period, he has united the Persians with their powerful neighbors, the Medes. He has conquered the fabulously wealthy kingdom of Lydia in modern-day Turkey, and now commands a vast empire that stretches from the Aegean Sea to the borders of India. Cyrus is not just another conqueror. He has cultivated a reputation for something unheard of, mercy. When he conquers a city, he doesn't slaughter its people or destroy its temples. He presents himself as a liberator, a restorer of proper order, a ruler who respects local traditions. The year is 539 BCE. The storm has arrived. Cyrus and his enormous Persian army stand before the gates of Babylon. From your vantage point on the magnificent walls, a direct assault seems laughable. The city has enough stored food to last for years. A siege would be futile. Inside the city, a great feast is underway, perhaps celebrating a religious festival. The leadership, under the regent Belshazzar, is confident, arrogant, secure in the belief that the walls of Babylon can never be breached. They have forgotten one crucial fact. The great Euphrates River flows directly through the center of their city, passing under the walls through massive river gates. This is where Cyrus enacts one of the most brilliant and audacious strategies in the history of warfare. This is the mainstream, legendary account of Babylon's fall. Far upriver from the city, Cyrus sets his troops and engineers to work. They are not building siege towers or battering rams. They are digging. They dig a massive new channel, a canal leading away from the river into a vast, marshy basin that can hold an immense volume of water. As night falls, and the sounds of revelry echo from within the city walls, Cyrus gives the order. The dam holding back the river is broken, and the mighty Euphrates is diverted into the new canal. The effect is not immediate, but it is relentless. Downstream in Babylon, the water level begins to fall. Inch by inch, the deep, swift river that has protected the city for centuries shrinks. It recedes from the high water marks on the city walls, exposing the slimy foundations. It becomes a shallow, sluggish stream, and then a muddy, walkable creek bed. The river gates, once deep underwater, are now gaping, undefended openings into the heart of the world's greatest city. Under the cover of darkness, Cyrus's elite troops, the 10,000 immortals, slip down the muddy riverbanks. They enter the city through the exposed river gates, their feet sinking into the sludge of the riverbed. The city is so large and the defenders so complacent that the Persians are deep inside the city before the alarm is even raised. The great feast turns to panic. The end comes not with a bang, but with a quiet, muddy infiltration. The impregnable city, the eternal Babylon, falls in a single night without a major battle. Of course, the story might not be quite so simple. The reliability of the Greek historian Herodotus's account, which provides the most dramatic version of these events, is often questioned by modern historians. Writing a century after the fact, he loved a good story. Contemporary Babylonian records, like the famous Cyrus cylinder, paint a different, less dramatic picture. They suggest that the fall of Babylon was as much an inside job as it was a brilliant military feat. The powerful priests of Marduk, alienated by Nabonidus's heresy, may have seen Cyrus as a divine instrument sent to restore their god to his rightful place. It's highly likely that the city gates were simply opened from within by collaborators who preferred the famously tolerant Persian to their own eccentric king. The truth is probably a mix of both. Cyrus's clever engineering created the opportunity, and the deep discontent within the city ensured it would succeed. History, after all, is written by the victors, and sometimes it gets a little extra spice from Greek tourists who hear the story 100 years later. But whatever the exact sequence of events, the result is the same. You awaken to a new reality. The sounds of battle have been minimal. The city has not been destroyed. But Persian soldiers now patrol the tops of your unconquered walls. Babylon, the jewel of Mesopotamia, the city of Hammurabi and Nebuchadnezzar, the eternal capital, has fallen. The Neo-Babylonian Empire is no more. Cyrus makes his triumphal entry into the city. But he does not come as a raging conqueror. He forbids looting. He issues a proclamation of peace. And in his first, most important act, he goes directly to the Esagila, the great temple of Marduk, to pay his respects. He takes the hand of the god statue, a traditional act for a Babylonian king, publicly declaring himself the legitimate successor and the restorer of the ancient faith. It is a masterstroke of propaganda. He is not a foreign invader. He is the savior who has freed Babylon from a heretical king. This moment marks a profound turning point in history. An old world, the world of the great Mesopotamian empires, has died. A new world, the world of the Persians, is being born. And its founder has a revolutionary new idea about how an empire should be run. You stand in the streets of conquered Babylon, a citizen of a fallen empire, and you wait for the inevitable. You've heard the stories of what happens when cities fall. The Assyrians, in their time, would have flayed the city's leaders and stacked pyramids of skulls at the gates. Even your own Babylonian kings, when they conquered Jerusalem, had destroyed its temple and dragged its people into exile. You expect fire, slaughter, and slavery. But the days pass, and the apocalypse fails to arrive. The Persian soldiers are disciplined. Looting is forbidden. The markets reopen. This new conqueror, Cyrus, is acting in a way that is deeply, fundamentally strange. As part of his campaign to legitimize his rule, Cyrus authorizes the creation of a remarkable object. It's a small, unassuming thing, a barrel-shaped cylinder of clay about 9 inches long, covered in dense Akkadian cuneiform. It is buried in the foundations of Babylon's city wall as a traditional deposit for a king who undertakes a building project. In the modern world, this Cyrus cylinder will become incredibly famous, celebrated as the world's first charter of human rights and a precursor to the Magna Carta. But this quirky and popular interpretation is a bit of a historical stretch. When you unroll the text inscribed on the cylinder, you find it's not a revolutionary declaration of universal freedom. Instead, it's a masterful piece of political propaganda, written in a traditional Mesopotamian style that would be perfectly familiar to you. It reads as if it were written by the priests of Marduk themselves. It rails against the former king Nabonidus, calling him an incompetent heretic who angered the gods. It then praises Cyrus, claiming that the great god Marduk personally scanned all the lands, found Cyrus to be a righteous ruler, and took him by the hand to lead him to Babylon. The cylinder boasts that Cyrus entered the city peacefully, restored the daily offerings at the temples, and, most importantly, gathered up the statues of the gods that previous Babylonian kings had taken from other cities and returned them to their rightful homes. The most famous passage, where Cyrus allows deported peoples to return to their lands, the policy that allowed the Jews to go home and rebuild their temple, is framed not as a human right, but as an act of piety, restoring the proper cosmic order that Nabonidus had disrupted. It was less a, "give me liberty," or "give me death," speech and more of an official memo stating, "Attention, the previous management was terrible. The new boss is great and will be restoring all traditional religious programming. Thank you. This cylinder, while not a modern human rights document, is a perfect summary of the revolutionary new model of empire that Cyrus was creating. This is the mainstream fact that made the Persian Empire so successful and different from what came before. Instead of imposing his own Persian gods on his new subjects, Cyrus practiced and promoted religious tolerance. He understood a fundamental truth. A conquered people is far less likely to rebel if their gods, temples, and priests are respected. He extends this principle to governance. He doesn't try to force you to become Persian. He dismantles the old, brutal model of empire based on terror and forced assimilation. In its place, he builds a system based on a partnership with local elites. He allows Babylonian officials to remain in their posts, administering the province according to their own laws and customs. The taxes flow to the Persian treasury, and Persian governors, called satraps, hold the ultimate authority. But for many people, daily life is not dramatically altered. This system of provinces, or satrapies, each with a degree of local autonomy but loyal to a central power, is the key to Persian stability. It's a genius move. By giving local leaders a stake in the system, he turns potential rebels into collaborators. This radical policy of tolerance has been a source of endless fascination for historians. Whether this policy was born from a genuine philosophical belief in multiculturalism or was simply a pragmatic tool of imperial control is still a subject of much discussion. Was Cyrus truly an enlightened philosopher-king, a man whose personal ethics led him to value the diversity of his subjects? The Hebrew Bible, for instance, calls him a Messiah, an anointed one of God, for his actions. Or was he the ultimate political pragmatist, a man who had done the cold calculation and realized that tolerance was simply the most efficient, cost-effective way to rule a vast and diverse empire? It was certainly cheaper than maintaining massive armies to constantly put down rebellions. The truth is likely a blend of both, but the result was the creation of the world's first truly multicultural superstate. To hold this vast and diverse empire together, Cyrus and his successor, Darius the Great, create a revolutionary infrastructure. They build the Royal Road, a great highway that stretches over 1,500 miles from the heart of Persia to the Aegean coast, allowing armies and officials to move with unprecedented speed. Along this road, they establish a royal postal service, a relay system of horsemen who could carry a message from one end of the empire to the other in about a week, a journey that would take a normal traveler 3 months. The Greek historian Herodotus was deeply impressed, famously writing, "Neither snow, nor rain, nor heat, nor gloom of night stays these couriers from the swift completion of their appointed rounds." It's a fantastic system, though you suspect that even they couldn't figure out a way to stop the delivery of junk mail from some pottery merchant in Sardis. Underneath this new Persian superstructure, the ancient culture of Mesopotamia endures. Babylon is no longer the capital of the world, but it remains a vital center of commerce, science, and religion within the Persian Empire. The great temples are still active. The scribal schools still teach the ancient cuneiform script. In fact, some of the most important work of Babylonian astronomers is done during this period. Freed from the political turmoil of their own imperial ambitions and funded by a stable Persian state, They continue their meticulous observations of the heavens, charting the movements of the planets and developing the mathematical tools that will be inherited by the Greeks and, eventually, the entire world. The Persian conquest was not a cultural apocalypse. The new management understood the value of Mesopotamia's intellectual capital and was happy to let it flourish, as long as the taxes were paid on time. As you look around your city of Babylon, you see a world that has been irrevocably changed, yet is in many ways the same. The language of the imperial court is now Persian, but the language of the market is still your native tongue. A Persian satrap resides in the palace of Nebuchadnezzar, but a Babylonian priest still presides over the rites of Marduk. Cyrus the Great has created a new kind of world order. His empire is the largest the world has ever seen, a political entity that encompasses dozens of peoples, languages, and religions, holding them all in a stable, peaceful, and prosperous union. His model of combining a strong, centralized authority with a high degree of local autonomy and cultural tolerance is a stunning achievement in statecraft, one that will be the benchmark for all future empires, from the Romans to the British. This moment marks the end of Mesopotamia's long reign as an independent, world-shaping power. For over 3,000 years, from the first villages to the fall of Babylon, this land between the rivers was the center of innovation, the forge of civilization. Now, it is a province, a rich, respected, and vital province, but a province nonetheless in another people's empire. The political story of ancient Mesopotamia is over, but its legacy is just beginning. Now, as our journey through time comes to a close, we can look back over this vast expanse of history and trace the echoes of this incredible civilization, the ideas and inventions born here that have flowed down through the centuries like the great rivers themselves, shaping the foundations of law, science, religion, and the very way we see the world today. The Great Persian Empire, this new and tolerant super-state, becomes the vessel for Mesopotamia's final and most enduring legacy. The era of Mesopotamian political dominance is over. It will be conquered again by Alexander the Great, and ruled by his Greek successors, and then by the Parthians, and then the Romans. But the ideas born in this fertile crescent have now been unleashed upon the world, and they will prove far more durable than any empire of brick and bronze. As you stand in the twilight of this ancient world, you can begin to trace the invisible threads that connect this land between the rivers to the foundations of your own time. The first and most fundamental gift is the idea of writing itself. Think back to that first scribe, pressing a reed stylus into a small lump of wet clay, creating the wedge-shaped marks of cuneiform. For over 3,000 years, this script was the premier intellectual technology of the ancient Near East. It was used to record not just sacks of grain, but epic poems, intricate laws, diplomatic treaties, and complex astronomical calculations. The very concept of capturing fleeting spoken words in a permanent, tangible form, the act that separates history from prehistory, was a Mesopotamian invention. Every book you've ever read, every email you've ever sent, is a distant descendant of those first humble clay tablets. Then there is the legacy of law and government. Remember Hammurabi standing before the god of justice, receiving the divine mandate to rule. The revolutionary idea that a society should be governed by a set of written, predictable laws, and that a king's primary duty is to be a shepherd to his people, responsible for their welfare, was forged here. The principle of an eye, for all its harshness, was an attempt to limit vengeance and introduce proportionality into justice. These concepts, of written law, of civic responsibility, of justice as a cornerstone of legitimate rule, flowed into the legal traditions of the civilizations that followed, a powerful countercurrent to the simple rule of might makes right. Perhaps the most tangible legacy is the one you carry with you every single day, on your wrist and on your phone. The Mesopotamians, particularly the Babylonians, were brilliant mathematicians and obsessive astronomers. Because their number system was sexagesimal, based on the number 60, they divided the circle into 360 degrees. They divided the hour into 60 minutes and the minute into 60 seconds. This is a direct, unbroken inheritance of 4,000 years. The fact that your clock reads the way it does is because a Babylonian priest, long ago, decided that 60 was a wonderfully divisible and elegant number. Every time you are late for an appointment, you have an ancient Sumerian to thank for the precise measurement of your tardiness. Their astronomers, from the tops of their ziggurats, meticulously mapped the heavens. They created the zodiac, that 12-part division of the sky that still fills the back pages of newspapers. They could predict lunar and solar eclipses with startling accuracy. This vast catalogue of celestial observation, preserved on clay tablets, was later passed to the Greeks, giving them a massive head start in the development of scientific astronomy. But it is in the realm of religion and myth that Mesopotamia's influence is perhaps most profound and most controversial. Their stories were so powerful they became part of the world's spiritual bedrock. Take, for example, the Great Flood. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, you read of the gods growing angry at the noise of mankind and deciding on a total extermination. One man, Utnapishtim, is warned by a god to build a massive boat, seal it with pitch, and load it with his family and the seed of all living things. The rains come, the world is drowned, and he survives by landing on a mountaintop. The extent to which this Mesopotamian myth, which predates the Hebrew scriptures by a millennium, directly influenced the biblical account of Noah is one of the most fascinating and contentious areas of comparative mythology. The parallels are simply too striking to be a coincidence. And then there are the demons. Your world was teeming with supernatural forces, many of them malevolent. There were specific demons responsible for specific afflictions. Demons of headaches, of fever, of stomach ailments. The terrifying demoness Lamashtu preyed on pregnant women and infants. This detailed demonology, and the accompanying rituals and incantations to exorcise these spirits, created a powerful framework for understanding evil. This quirky, detailed system of specific spiritual afflictions would profoundly influence later Jewish, Christian, and Islamic concepts of demonology, possession, and the rituals of exorcism. The idea of a named, specific evil entity that can be cast out by a person of faith has some of its deepest roots in the dusty plains of Akkad. These powerful streams of influence flowed into the modern world through three main channels. First, through the Persians and then the Greeks. Greek thinkers inherited the vast astronomical and mathematical knowledge of the Babylonians, which formed the foundation of their own scientific revolution. Second, through the Hebrew Bible. The ancient Israelites were neighbors to, and for a time exiles in, Mesopotamia. Their sacred texts are filled with stories, the creation of the world, the Garden of Eden, the Tower of Babel, the Great Flood, that all show a deep and complex engagement with the myths and ideas of their powerful Mesopotamian neighbors. And third, much later, through the Islamic Golden Age, Arab scholars preserved and translated the Greek scientific texts, which contained all that inherited Babylonian knowledge, ensuring it survived the European Dark Ages to fuel the Renaissance and the scientific revolution. For nearly 2,000 years after its final decline, ancient Mesopotamia was a lost civilization. The cuneiform script was unreadable. The great cities had crumbled into anonymous, windswept mounds. Its world was known only through the dim and often hostile lens of the Bible and Greek historians. It was a land of myth and shadow. But then, in the 19th century, daring archaeologists began to dig into those mounds. They unearthed the ruins of Nineveh and Babylon. They found the library of Ashurbanipal, the law code of Hammurabi. And slowly, painstakingly, they deciphered the cuneiform script. The lost world of Mesopotamia began to speak again, telling its own story in its own words for the first time in millennia. The journey that began with a handful of people deciding to settle down and cultivate wild grain led, step by inexorable step, to cities, to kings, to empires, to laws, to science. It is a story of brilliant innovation and terrifying brutality, of hubris and resilience, of humanity's first great attempt to build a complex, orderly society. The echoes of that attempt are all around us, embedded so deeply in the foundations of our own world that we rarely even notice they are there. They are in the way we tell time, the way we write laws, and the ancient stories we still tell ourselves about the beginning of the world and the nature of good and evil. The first chapter of human history was written here, in the land between the rivers. And now, our long journey through time is coming to its gentle end. The grand spectacle of empires rising and falling, of ziggurats reaching for a vast, starry sky, begins to soften and recede into the quiet darkness. The clamor of the Babylonian marketplace, the clang of the bronze smith's hammer, the scratching of a stylus on a wet clay tablet, all these sounds fade away, replaced by the soft, steady rhythm of your own breathing. The story of Mesopotamia is vast, a tale of millennia that we have drifted through together, but like all stories, it must now be laid to rest. The weight of all that history can now be set aside, as your mind lets go of the distant past and settles into the simple, peaceful reality of the present moment. The dust of those ancient cities can now settle, and the great rivers can flow on, unheard, in the land of dreams. There is nothing more to learn, nothing more to see. There is only the comfort of your bed, the stillness of your room, and the deep, restorative peace of the coming sleep.